Hi guys, it's Lori. So today I want to talk about a really important subject, drug addiction, but in particular I want to talk about crystal meth. Now, where I'm from, we have an opiate epidemic. And, when I was coming up, I was thinking about it. When I was coming up, I mean, where I grew up and that sort of thing. And I was out of my house by the time I was 15. So, um, because of the abuse, because of the way things were, a combination of factors, I was exposed to all kinds of drugs and alcohol, probably since I was like 10 or 11 to all through my teenage years. But I walked away from all of that very young. A lot of times people are just, kind of experimenting, and I was long gone from it. But um, in the time, and I hung out with a lot older people than me, so maybe people my age have a different experience than me. But heroin was not popular. Um, People that did heroin or were rumored to do heroin were like the people you wanted to stay away from, and there weren't very many. It was very few and far between. I remember I met this woman, Mia. She was a lot older than me. Well, I thought she was like, worldly and everything, but she was probably in her early to mid 20s. I thought she was absolutely beautiful, and like I said, like a woman of the world. I don't know how old I was. It was before I moved out of my parents' house, so I had to be younger than 15. And she always told me, she knew how I thought she was so cool and all that, and she always told me that um, it wasn't as cool as I thought, and blah blah blah. But she never went into detail. Well, she had this boyfriend John, and one day I was hanging out at her apartment, and John came over, and she actually pulled me aside and said, "You need to stay away from John and people like John, and because of that, you really shouldn't hang out with me." And John, it was the first person I ever saw put I don't know, like a rubber thing around his arm and shoot up. It scared the crap out of me. And she told me later, she confessed to me that she wasn't a drug user, and she started dating him, and he actually shot her up, and she was addicted to heroin, as was he. And, the people, like I said, that did heroin were like rough people. That scared the crap out of me. So, I don't know whatever became of Mia because, I took her advice and I stayed away. Um, when I got a little older into my 20s, the people that I knew that were doing drugs were doing cocaine, and they weren't doing crack cocaine, they were doing cocaine, and they would snort it or whatever. Crack wasn't around either. That was when I got a little older, people were doing crack. So I don't know if it was around and I just didn't know about it. Also, I live on the East Coast, so I know some of my friends that moved to the West Coast had experienced what they called it crank then. I didn't know what it was. We didn't have it around here. It's crystal meth. Anyhow, so I believe what happened with the comeback of heroin in this area is the pharmaceutical companies and doctors started prescribing opiates for pain, and they got out of control with it. And a lot of people were on pain management, some still are. And the DEA got involved, and the doctors some of the doctors, a lot of the doctors just stopped prescribing. Like they didn't, first of all, they didn't make their patients aware of the side effects or of the addictive aspect. So there wasn't education. People took it even as prescribed. They became dependent on it at the very least, and then didn't know how to. They realized they were sick. When the doctors just shut them off, they realized they were sick, and some went to the street. And heroin being a lot cheaper than opiates, ended up on heroin. And I think that's how it really exploded around here because honestly, with the epidemic, I have met people who are professionals who work, they dress suit and tie or dresses or whatever, and they're, or all the way down to like the drudges, what people call the drudges of society that have an addiction problem. I was just talking to a state trooper the other day, and without saying a word about my opinion, I asked him what he thought. And he said, just as I believe, the opiate addiction is easing up around here. It's not, he said, you go down to Massachusetts, which isn't far from where I live. I mean, it's a hop, skip, and a jump. He said it's really big there. But between all the drug busts and everything, it's easing up a bit. Fentanyl's around, but fentanyl's going into all kinds of drugs. Now they're putting it, I guess, even in the marijuana, from what I hear. And then I wonder, is that the government doing that because they want people to go to dispensaries? I don't know. I don't put anything past the government, and, I think they're in bed with the cartels and all of that, but that's another video. But what he said is what's big around here now is crystal meth. A lot of people are on crystal meth. Well, I was at a drug rehab not too long ago talking to a counselor there, and just from my own experience, now I'm a life coach, I talk to a lot of people every day. I know a lot of people who have lost their children, lost their parents, lost their loved ones somehow to drug addiction, so or suicide because of addiction, or overdose, whatever. I've seen it through people that I love too. And I asked her if they know anything about the different drugs. Do they research the different drugs? Do they know the difference? And she looked at me like I was being difficult and was like, no, addiction is addiction and we treat it all the same. Drugs are drugs are drugs, which I'm sorry, but I beg to differ just from my own, what I've seen and people that I've talked to. Drugs are different. All drugs are different. And not only are the drugs themselves different, they're being laced with all kinds of stuff that we don't know what it is. The people on the street that are using every day don't know what it is. Everything from freaking baby laxative to really something dangerous that'll kill you, but not only that, each individual reacts differently to each drug. So I was asking the trooper what he believes are the most dangerous drugs right now. And he said alcohol and crystal meth, from what he can see. And I mean, he's out there on the street, so I got to take his word as, important and valid. I too agree with that. I'm not saying heroin is not bad. Don't get me wrong. I know heroin's bad. I know it destroys families. I know it destroys people. I believe that there is a spirit of addiction that comes in with any kind of addiction or addictive substance. I believe, though, that each substance kind of has its own set of spirits. Alcohol has ruined many a life, and it still is today, and it's socially accepted. Some people are addicted to food. Some people are addicted to sex. Some people are addicted to love. Some people are addicted to gambling. Some people have personality disorders, which I also believe are many times spirit-led. Some people are nasty, evil people, and I believe that they're being led by spirit. And if they're of the world, not that I excuse it, but I understand it, but somebody who claims to be of God and is coming from a nasty, evil place really turns my stomach. But that's another video. So, I'm not saying heroin's not bad. I know what happens with heroin addicts. I love several heroin addicts. I know people that have lost their children to opiates. I know people that have lost their parents to opiates. I know people who have taken their own lives due to opiate addiction. So I am not saying that opiates are not bad. I just want to focus on crystal meth for a minute. And I'm going to try to make this not too long, but it's a scary drug because, well, do you know that most of the street drugs today have been used by pharmaceutical companies and doctors? Most of them. Heroin included, cocaine, Yeah, like when I was coming up, cocaine was, well, that was when I got a little older, like as a young adult. Cocaine was big. I knew a lot of people that were, we used to have commercials. It was when Reagan was in office, and Nancy Reagan started the Just Say No campaign. And we had these commercials where people would snort like their house, their car, their family up their nose. And it's so true. Cocaine has destroyed so many people, so many families. And it wasn't crack back then, it was coke. And they would snort it. And then, but when I was real young, like when I saw that guy shoot up and it scared the crap out of me, the biggest things were like speed, not crystal meth, but I guess just amphetamine. Used to be able to buy them through magazines, Black Beauties and Pink Hearts or whatever. It could have even been ephedra, ephedra comes from a plant and it's speed. Crystal meth actually was designed as a man-made substitute for ephedra or equivalent to ephedra, and it was made. I don't know if it's 1818 or I can't remember 1918, but it was a long time ago. The Japanese made it. I don't know if a German made it first, and then the Japanese developed it or something like that. I'm not real clear on that, but I know it was a long time ago, and they used to be able to get it over the counter, and pharmaceutical companies actually put it in inhalers for asthma. And when they realized that it had like a euphoric effect, and that it would keep you up, they started prescribing it for narcolepsy and disorders like that. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder. And I'm not sure what else they prescribed it for. I know ADHD, we've got like Adderall, which is, I think it's like one or two ingredients off. So it's the same kind of drug family. What's the thing with crystal meth that's made on the street, and I'm not saying crystal meth that's made, by these guys was any better, but I think it was called Pervitin or something. I'm probably wrong. I can't remember the name of it, but they sold it over the counter, especially in Europe for a while. I think here too. And the soldiers would take it during the world wars, to stay awake. Kamikaze pilots were given doses before they went on their missions. I think the Allies used it too. I don't know if the Americans used it or not. I'm not sure. I know the Nazis used it. The Japanese soldiers used it. I think some of the Allies used it. I wouldn't put it past our government to give it too. And at the time, obviously, they didn't, just like some drugs today, these pharmaceutical companies and the doctors and the government all go on board, FDA approve it, and then, 20 years later find out that it's dangerous, That's why you got to be really careful. Just because something is prescribed doesn't mean it's okay. And just same goes for herbs. Like just because something's a natural herb doesn't mean it's okay, and they aren't regulated at all. Not that I'm saying the FDA is great, but I think it was like 1959 or something like that. They made it by prescription only in the U.S. And then eventually, I think it was 1970 that they stopped. They outlawed it. But ecstasy used to be an antidepressant. There's all kinds of drugs that used to be, made by pharmaceutical companies. So anyway, now we've got crystal meth on the street, and like when I was coming up, I never heard of it. I mean, we had, like I said, like speed, which could have been ephedra. I don't know. And really like acid and stuff like that was big, and pot. But and before that, people like before me, they talk about like the Quaaludes and stuff. I'm too young for that. Well, when they were big around here anyway. But I did have friends that went off to California and they were doing this drug that we called crank, and we were like, what is going on? Like I knew people that were like really calm and great people, good people, and all of a sudden I'm hearing they're like going crazy and doing this and that and ended up in jail for like beating their wife or something. I'm like, what? It's not the person I know. So this drug was like bad, um, and that's the way it's getting here now. So the person at the rehab had no idea really about alcoholism. Now this is a so-called drug and alcohol counselor, okay? And I'm not saying they're all like that, but she's not the only one I've talked to. I've talked to several, even medical doctors, unfortunately, that don't really get it. Prosecutors, defense attorneys. We're throwing people in jail for being addicts. Now, okay, addicts, will do things that they wouldn't necessarily do if they didn't have their addiction. I'm not saying that we should just let everybody go. In fact, I think dealers should absolutely be punished, but sometimes users become dealers to, pay for their habit. It's a long, we got to figure this out. But as long as we're standing in judgment, we're not going to figure it out. And having our jails and prisons full for non-violent crimes is not going to figure it out either. Letting people die in jail or in prison because they're coming off of a drug is not going to help anybody either. We have to, they teach you in rehab it's an illness, and then you get out of rehab and they lock you up. So which is it? Is it an illness or is it a crime? Anyhow, so crystal meth, I guess, has been around for years. By prescription, then not prescription, then it gets big in one part of the country, then it goes, for whatever reason, dies down. Then it gets big. Well, right now it's big in New England, very big. And I believe, like I said, that each addictive substance has its own set of spirits that come along with it. Spirit of suicide kind of tacks on to all of them. Nobody says, hey, I want to be an alcoholic. I want to be a drug addict. Nobody. Most people are either they're covering pain of soul wounds, deep depression, anxiety disorder, childhood scars, childhood trauma, or they've got a mental illness. They're trying to medicate, That's why people start using. Some people will try a drug and really love it. It's in their makeup, to end up addicted to it or whatever. So I believe that spirits are attached to these drugs. Hi, Pepper. Here she comes again. She did this the last time I tried to make the video. You can't go right in front of the camera, baby girl. Okay? You cannot do that. But let me tell you something about crystal meth. And anybody who, Pepper, please, anybody who has lived in this, I've talked to several addicts about it. And I've never heard somebody who has either become addicted to it or lived around people that are addicted to it, or maybe in the drug world and known people that are addicted to it, that would disagree with me. I believe, like I said, all addictive substances you're at risk. There's these spirits that are attached to it, Just like there's a spirit, same thing, not just substances, but, gambling or sex or whatever. They all have, I feel like they, just like some places have certain areas that, it might be a nice neighborhood, and then within months or even, a couple of years, whatever, it turns into like a drug haven or prostitution, whatever, child trafficking, whatever. I really believe that there are spirits that kind of take over that domain or whatever. Same thing with certain substances, whatever. So, but I think crystal meth brings the devil himself. I really do. And I'll tell you why. Because people, they end up getting sleep deprived. Obviously, that's why the soldiers used it, because they feel like they can go. But if you see a meth addict in action, and I'm not talking about somebody who's just tried it and they're like, woo, I'm on top of the world, best drug in the world, I can get a million things done. I'm talking about somebody who's a regular user. They appear to be busy all the time. They're going, and not doing a damn thing. I've seen this over and over and over again. They're not just 15, 20 minutes late for something. They're 4 hours late for something. But they have, in their mind, legitimate excuses. They hallucinate. They will get something in their mind and become very paranoid. bad things start to happen. I feel like the devil himself comes in. It's like an invitation to the devil. And of course, you know, a lot of people in the crystal meth world too are doing unusual sexual things, are a lot of them are into, like, if it's not straight up Satan worship, it's into like dark magic stuff, you know? And they may not be doing a damn thing themselves, but think about how the spirits are feeling. They're like, ooh, we got this one, right? This one thinks, you know, it's popping off people here and there, you know? If your loved one is addicted to any substance, it can tear apart the family. But crystal meth seems to have just an evil of its own. It's the devil's favorite drug, I think. That and alcohol. I think it goes crystal meth, alcohol, then probably heroin and opiates and, you know, whatever. I really do. If the devil had a preference, I think. The spirit of suicide comes along, you know. I knew one girl who was a crystal meth addict, is a crystal meth addict, and when I first met her, she, you know, first impressions, she seemed fine, but then it didn't take me long to figure out she's using something, you know. She wasn't nodding out or anything, so I knew it wasn't like an opiate or like a benzo or like a Xanax or something like that. I didn't know a whole lot about crystal meth, but as I've known her for several years now, and there was a period of time where she had most everybody, even those closest to her, like her mom and, you know, whoever else, believing that she wasn't using. And she would talk about not using and how she got over it and look you right in the eye. But I don't know if it's because of who I am and what I do, or just because it was obvious if you're looking through spiritual eye. I don't know, but I knew she was using regularly, and she ended up, you know, confessing. She's also got other issues. Like I said, most people who do drugs are covering for something else. And she did admit that she had never one day, not even one day, gone without it. What she had was like a maintenance program. So she felt like it was okay because she wasn't doing outrageous amounts. She would just do it every day without fail throughout the day in smaller doses to keep her up, keep her going. You know, she never slept, you know. And she was able to maintain, and people around her not know. How many alcoholics do that, you know? So don't be fooled. You know, people can do this drug just like that, you know. Usually with like heroin, they can't do that. You know when somebody's high on heroin. You know somebody can't smoke pot. One thing about pot is you can't, you know, people say, well, drinking, and which I agree, drinking I think is the devil's second favorite. And I don't know too many people that'll just have one drink. But the thing with alcohol is you can just have one drink and probably be okay, right? If you like the taste of it or whatever. With pot, you can't do that. You know, you're going to take one or two hits, whatever, you're going to get high. You know what I'm saying? So, crystal meth, she thought she was maintaining, but absolutely she was changing her chemistry. She was getting high. Any kind of drug. Heroin, I've never met somebody who does heroin and it's just absolutely fine. They think they are, but you can absolutely tell. But with this drug, she was maintaining, and that's who she was. She felt better on it. She had, she really lacked self-esteem. She grew up, she's terrified of her mother. It's just like this long thing, but so she was able to maintain. She was able to talk in public. She was able to, you know, be an outgoing, friendly person because she had this drug helping her along the way. But at the same time, it gets in, and it's the devil's drug. I'm telling you, there are dark spirits that come with this drug. If you have a person around you that's using it, pay attention to what happens if you don't cleanse afterwards. If you don't, you know, if you let that person get too close, pay attention. One more thing I want to say about this, because like I said, I talked to many people. I've seen all different scenarios. I know some people who have the tough love approach, who have thrown people out. I know people who have tried to work through it. God will help you through it. Absolutely. I think God's the answer. You know, God will lead you to what will work for you. Sometimes he takes it away immediately from people, but most times he makes us, go through whatever it is. It destroys families and stuff, regardless of what you do, regardless of if you use the tough love approach or not. But I don't think publicly shaming people is the answer. I really don't. I don't agree with that. I think being helpful and supportive and making sure that children are safe and making sure that you do whatever it is that you can do. But if God forbid if something happens, please do not blame yourself, because the initial use is always the addict's choice. Always. I'm not saying it's not. But I think we need to be educated on what drugs do to you, each individual drug. I'm not saying, every American should take all these classes, but I do think prosecutors should. I think defense attorneys should. I think drug and alcohol counselors should know their stuff. Parents, even if your children are not involved, chances are they have a friend that is. It would be a good idea to have these free educational, whether they're online or in person, support groups. We need to know that these addicts are people that are going through something that changes their mind and the way that they think and the things that they do. And I think we should have, instead of imprisoning them, I think that we should make them accountable, make a program, available and mandatory for them. I know they say, they can't get help if they don't want it, but if you make it mandatory, you're not leaving here. And if you do leave, okay, you are getting incarcerated. Maybe after being there long enough, it may do some good. We got to do something. We have to do something. But at the same time, we got to come back to God. And we need to be praying. We need to be praying for these. We need to be binding and rebuking these evil spirits that are around. We need to be going after those that are going after our children, our parents, our family members, The spirit of suicide, I'm just going to end with this, tags along with this. And I know a lot of people, like I said, who have either lost their child because they're just off and using, or their parent, or whatever, their loved one, or because they've actually OD'd or taken their own life, or they're sitting in a prison cell. Whatever the case may be, loss is loss and grief is grief. And there's survivor's guilt. There's guilt even if your loved one is out there using and still technically alive, but one of the Walking Dead. It's like a survivor's guilt. It's like, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. And maybe we all need to take accountability. Maybe we played our part, but you cannot take responsibility or accountability for a decision that an adult makes, But we do need to recognize that these are human beings with soul wounds too. And maybe you have played a part in creating that soul wound. I'm not saying you have. Please don't get me wrong. But maybe you have. And the only thing you can do, you can't go backwards, but you could apologize and you could say, you are a human being. I understand that. If you can't be around the person, because believe me, I understand it drains you. You can say that. I love you. I cannot be around you right now, but I love you. I just think education is important. Education for everybody. I think we need to change our legal system, because I know that there are many, I know just off the top of my head, more than I can count on one hand, young men and women who have taken their own life due to the legal system. Now, I'm not saying they didn't break the law, but the legal system can sometimes be so cold. And I'm not talking about people who kill or people who hurt people or, or terrify people. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about crime, petty crime, to feed their addiction. And the law just won't. They go overboard. They don't let it go. 3 years later, the person is, done everything they can to be clean and sober, and they're still struggling because it's a process. And then the law steps in, and they're like, you know what? I'll never get my life together, and they take their own life. I'm going to do a video on suicide because I know so many people, right off, like I said, more than I can count on one hand, that did that for that reason. And then I know other people who took their own lives for other reasons. And suicide is really, really difficult for those of us left behind. Death is hard enough, but suicide's really hard. So anyway, I've rambled long enough. If you have a drug addiction or any addiction and you would like to talk about it, there is a way out. There is, sorry about me, kitty. There is a way out. All hope is not gone. I don't care how deep into your addiction you are. I knew this guy Joe once. Joe was a professional man, but he was an alcoholic, and he was married, and because of his alcoholism, he wasn't always the nicest husband. He wasn't always home, he worked, he was a workaholic and an alcoholic. Made tons of money, but he wasn't home. Well, his wife ended up being diagnosed with a very fast-growing cancer, and she died very quickly. And before she died, she got very, very ill, and he was unable to, what he felt like, make it up to her. Well, from the day she died, he went down a very dark place, and started drinking more. He ended up in a deep, deep depression, didn't pay his bills, lost his job, went through all, whatever he had, lost money, I think there was probably gambling involved there too, more and more alcoholism, just totally wrecked his own body and ended up homeless. Just a bum on the street. He was like, look at these same people that at one time, treated me like the guest of honor, now can't even be bothered to look at me because now I'm just the homeless bum, It happens in society. Let's not pretend it doesn't. It does, and it happens way too often. This man had a heart of gold. It was survivor's guilt, and it was guilt over, what he had done. The devil will do that to you. The devil condemns. The Holy Spirit convicts and helps you to change it. All you got to do is allow him in, and he will change you from the inside out. But the devil condemns until you are basically nothing. Joe tried to take his own life several times. It didn't work by the grace of God, and he came to know Jesus, and he died a homeless man, but a man at peace. So it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody. So there's public shaming and treating people like crap. I understand the things they do are not good things, and I understand that it steals a part of you. Believe me, I get it. I get it. And if you have to walk away, walk away. But putting them down and hammering is not necessarily going to help. So, anyhow, why did I bring up Joe? I don't remember. But, anyway, there is hope. That was my point. So Joe died a peaceful man, a man at peace, clean and sorry about that. My video ran out, or I thought it did, or whatever. But there is hope. So if you are facing addiction, no matter what it is, if you need to talk, I've helped. I'm not going to say, hey, I can do it, but I've helped some people. At least I know the struggle's real. You can lean on me. You can talk to me. I'll help you as much as possible. I'll try to find programs in your area, whatever meets, your criteria. I'm a life coach. Maybe I can help that way. I know about Smart Recovery. There's also Reformers Unanimous, which is a Christian organization. There's, AA, NA, all of it, right? There's something. There's God. And if you love an addict, same thing. You know what? You need to take care of yourself. You need to keep your vibration up. You need to stay in prayer, and you can't let it steal your soul. You can't let it destroy your family. It's okay to say, I hate what you're doing. I hate who you've become when you're using or, through this period, but I love you. Don't lose sight of who they are. Okay? All right, I'll talk to you guys later. I'm sorry this video is so long. I hope that, and I mean it, reach out if you need to. Okay? Like I said, I may or may not be able to help you, but I could refer you out. I mean, I'll do what I can. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. I hope you're having a great day.